Hey everybody, Kit Fairchild with Across the Desk. Well, I have something special for Across the Desk viewers. If you go to barnesandnoble.com, bn.com, and you type in 10 Lessons of Conservative Cowardice, go to the book page, the book I wrote, click buy, go to the shopping cart, and down in the activation code put BNP for Barnes & Noble Promotion, ATD across the desk, 25 for 25%, and you'll get 25% off the list price of the book. Right now, for the next year, if you're an across the desk viewer, go to Barnes & Noble, go to 10 Lessons of Conservative Cowardice, buy the book, in the shopping cart put BNP ATD 25 and get 25% off the book. Well, last week we had a primary of sorts here in Oklahoma, and some of the races came down to the wire, others weren't really that close. And that's what we're going to discuss this week, both Republican and Democrat races that happened during the primary, and the look ahead to the general election. So yeah, we had this primary that happened last Tuesday, and we got some interesting results out of it as a result. First up, we had a Democratic primary between Madison Horn and Jason Bollinger. I honestly, in the results of this, expected Jason to do a lot better than he did. It was a pretty much 60-40, and I think a big reason of that was because Jason just really wasn't out there in social media quite as much as Madison was. And if anybody's been paying attention, that's really where the Democrats are. We don't really watch a lot of local stations or local news. Most of us stream our content or read it online, and that's what we're doing. And he really didn't hit that, where Madison really did take advantage of those things. And she also did a great job of really putting her thumb down on what the progressive issues were here in the state of Oklahoma and holding to that line and gathering a bunch of support for it. And she won. I think she's going to be a very tough opponent for Lankford. She doesn't really take a lot of crap, and she's very smart. She's also has a lot more experience in areas that Lankford doesn't, and I think it's really going to show. I really don't expect Lankford to want to debate her because he has the profile, she doesn't. It's not going to help anybody but Madison if he does debate her, so she needs to really rely on what she's been doing so far to really get her name out there. Get out there in the social media. Start taking ads on those alternate media sites. The Frontier, the Lost Ogle, the Oklahoma Observer, stuff like that. Get out there in the social media, which is what she's doing. She ought to she's going to keep on doing that. She probably needs to reach out to other people too. And I'm not sure what her campaign's really going to look like, but I wish her luck going against Lankford. It'll be a tough fight here in a state where we mostly lean conservative, especially in state races. The other interesting race that happened was actually here locally in Oklahoma County in District 1 of the County Commissioner seat. Carrie Bloomberg won. She's the incumbent Democrat, which is wild because she's the incumbent Democrat and pulled challengers. Well, Anastasia Pittman became the challenger that was able to take her on in the primary and came really close to winning. Within 120 votes, that's really close. That tells you a lot about Carrie Bloomberg and kind of her weakness with other Democrats. And she really did kind of rub some progressives and Democrats the wrong way in Oklahoma County, especially when she sided with maps that were obviously gerrymandered to harm Kathy Cummings and help out Brian Mon. But she did have an impossible position that she was put into by Calvi and Mon because they offered her two maps. One map kept Kathy in the district where she was already running, but the road miles for Carrie's district would blow away, and that wouldn't be good for Carrie or her district. The other map, of course, moved Kathy out and put Mon in a district he was already in, for a house that he was moving into that wasn't in the district originally. So they gerrymandered it, but if Carrie didn't accept that map, she was going to get stuck with no road miles for her district, which is bad because that's funding and everything else that goes along with it. And it would really make her and her constituency and the people in District 1 pay a big price for accepting a non-gerrymandered map. That still left a bad taste in a lot of people's mouths. And there's other things too. The jail trust. She voted a few times in certain ways that Democrats and progressives really didn't want her to vote in Oklahoma County, but she voted on them anyway the way she did. Voting for the jail trust funds, voting to keep the jail trust going like it is with all the deaths it's having and all the chaos and inefficiencies that it does. She's keeping all that going, which kind of rubbed a lot of people the wrong way. And that's really why Anastasia was able to get in there and challenge her the way she did. But Kerry pulled it out, won by 120 votes, which really is a really close race. And so that's where the real drama was. If you wanted to know if any primary races in Oklahoma about Democrats, that was probably where the real drama was. In District 1 of Oklahoma County for the county commissioner seat, between an incumbent and a challenger. But now Kerry gets to go on to the general election. Now, the other interesting races are pretty much Republican. And one that I noticed was there's one against Leslie Osborne and Sean Roberts, who wants to call himself the Patriot. Of course, that's so kooky. But here you go. He lost. He lost, which is a good thing. If anything came out of any of these races last night, one of the good things we can go is that Sean Roberts lost. And he lost to Leslie Osborne, which really isn't saying much. I really don't like her that much either. But at least she's not a crazy kook like Sean Roberts, who wants to actually harm people because they went down and checked their voter registration for Democrat. So at least we don't have that person in office who actually wants to use the office to do harm to people in a form of a big conservative government to go after people he doesn't like. And the even bigger extra surprise and good news out of this is Sean Roberts is out of politics. He doesn't have an office to hold anymore. Not saying he won't or he won't run again, I'll probably see him. But right now, he's out. He doesn't have any power. Zero, none, and that's good news for Oklahoma. If there's any good news, that's what it is. Sean Roberts is out of office, any office, and that will hold for at least another couple of years. So that's the good news in all this. Labor Commissioner. We're going to have Leslie Osborne run against the Democratic challenger, but at least it's not crazy, kooky Sean Roberts. Now, the other race that was very contentious was the one against Grace and Walters for Education Secretary. Now, the main surprising thing about this is it wasn't a lopsided race. Ryan Walters did not outright win by 60 points. It was a lot closer than that, which gives me some hope for some of the Republicans and conservatives in this state who know that Ryan is a poor choice when it comes to tendering our public education here in Oklahoma. He's not a public education advocate. He's the opposite, and he even says so. So he's even running on that. Well, the good news in this, I guess, is it was about 54%. He didn't really win by a huge landslide. It just didn't happen for him. A lot of conservatives have a bad taste in their mouths from him, especially from the corruption when it comes to how he handled Class Wallet and just signed off blankly, letting parents buy grills and dishwashers and china. Private school parents, that is, buying Christmas trees and game consoles and whole gaming systems. A whole Pac-Man table. Bought that. School purposes. Not only that, there's also the other $250,000 that was misappropriated as extra security or grounds treatment when they actually bought firearms with it. So that kind of, okay, that's a little icky. That's a little icky, man. So he didn't garner a whole bunch of support. And I've already seen where Republicans are out there saying, hey, we have to save education from Ryan Walters. That says something. Because that's Mark Mullen's tagline. We're going to save America from Americans. But here we are with other Republicans saying, hey, Ryan Walters is a bad guy. We don't want him in this position. We have to save education from people like Ryan Walters. We have to. But there you go, right? Ryan Walters won. Now, and it wasn't by a landslide, so that's the good news, but he still won, so that's a little deflating. I wish it was April Grace. That would be a much tougher campaign, but at least it's somebody with some experience. Somebody with education, real education experience, not taught history in a classroom for several years. That's all he did. Few years taught history. This other lady, not only did she teach, she was also a superintendent. She also had administrative experience and skills. She also understood how boards run and all that stuff. So she by far had the experience that Ryan Walters did have. And that tells you something else about conservatives. They really don't care about qualifications. They care more about perceptions. And that's what you get. So now we have Ryan Walters, who's going to go against Gina Nelson, who is the Democratic candidate, who is very highly qualified, more so than Ryan Walters, to lead public education in Oklahoma, and is who we really need in there. This is how important this is. I'm going to tell you something. In 2018, the midterm election, now we're not talking about primaries or anything else, we're talking about the midterm election. Only 21% of Oklahomans showed up to vote. That's registered voters. 1 in 5 registered voters, that's both parties, all parties, showed up to vote. Only 1 in 5. Those are deplorable showings. It shows the disconnect of people with their government, with the process and everything else. Of course, when you get bombarded with negative ads and bullying and all this other stuff, suppression and everything else, you can see it. You can see how it works, the gerrymandering and everything else. It just deflates you. I get that. But you have to vote. If anything else, this election is so important when it comes to education secretary. Screw everything else. Governor, all that other stuff, which is still important. But really, there's really nothing more important on the ballot this year than education secretary. We're going to lose our freedoms. We're going to lose our public schools. And we're going to lose so much if Ryan Walters is actually the elected superintendent of education. If he's the education secretary, if he's the superintendent, it's going to be bad for Oklahoma in so many ways. We can't let him have that job. We have to show up to vote. Now, I was encouraged, I really was. When you look at the polling this time around, about 25% of registered voters showed up to the primary, the second primary, which usually really low. It's usually like 15. So we almost killed it on showing up by getting up to 25. 1 in 4 people showed up to vote. That's registered to vote. That's not new people you sign up. That's people that are already registered, which ought to tell you something. When you go to register people to vote, only expect 1 in 4 to 1 in 5 of those to actually go vote. And this is what I say. It's so important to contact people that are already registered to vote and get them to vote. Still important to sign up registered voters, and I believe the Democratic Party in Oklahoma can actually walk and chew gum at the same time. There's enough of us here where we can do both. We can sign up new voters, and we can go after the voters who are already signed up that don't vote. Near 80% from what I'm seeing. So, this election is so important. Come November 8th, you have to vote. You have to. You have to go vote. If we can get those numbers up, we can win. I guarantee you we can. Because this is across the board. Democrat and Republican. I'm not saying Republicans show up more than Democrats. They might in this state, I don't know. But this is aggregate overall. Only 21% showed up to vote in 2018. Midterm election. That's it. That's all who decided who Governor Stitt was decided by 21% of the registered voters in this state. That tells you something. If Democrats could get just 40% of the registered voters, we're not even talking half, 1 and 2. If we could just get 40% of our registered voters out, we'll win our elections. We will win them. We will win education secretary, because I know there's plenty of Republicans who are ready to not vote for him. Sit at home at the least, vote for the Democrat at the most. I know there are. So that's why this election is so important. It is. Because it's going to decide who our governor is, and more importantly, who's going to run our education. Who's going to do that? Is it going to be Ryan Walters? Or is it going to be Gina? Well, you know who's going to decide that? The low percentage of people that show up to vote. You could be one of those if you do it. And if everybody does it, there won't be a low percentage. It'll be a much higher one. And it's really a low bar. It really is. And we can do it. Anyway. This is Across the Desk with Kit Fairchild. And that's primary season for you. Here we go on with the midterm election in November. And as always, we'll see you next week.